True Apartment Nightmares, 3 chilling stories that actually happened. Welcome to DTC, the place of the brave, where the chilling whispers of the unknown come to life. In today's video, we dive into 3 true chilling apartment horror stories that will send shivers down your spine. These eerie encounters, experienced by real people, reveal the terrifying events that unfolded behind the closed doors of seemingly ordinary apartments. From inexplicable sounds to sinister figures lurking in the shadows, each story is a reminder that sometimes the scariest things happen where you least expect them. So turn off the lights, lock the doors, and join us as we uncover these spine-tingling tales. Story 1. The Haunting of the Apartment, a true chilling horror story. It was the fall of 1981, and my mother, at just 24 years old, was living in a small, cramped apartment on a quiet but slightly run-down street in Jackson, Mississippi. She had moved in with her friend, a musician who was often away on weekends for gigs, leaving my mother alone for long stretches. That particular weekend, her friend had gone out of town for a few days, leaving my mom alone in the apartment. She knew she'd be spending the next couple of days in solitude, but she had no idea that this would be a time she'd never forget. The apartment itself had a strange air about it, small, with outdated furniture, old wood floors that creaked under the slightest step, and walls that seemed to absorb the sounds around them. It wasn't the kind of place you'd expect to feel truly safe in, but it was home for now. The dim lighting and the coldness that lingered in the apartment made it feel almost as if the building itself was holding its breath. On Sunday evening after dinner, my mother felt a creeping unease settle over her. It wasn't just the silence of the empty apartment, it was something deeper. A sense of being watched as though unseen eyes were studying her every move. She brushed off the feeling, telling herself it was just the loneliness and darkness that always seemed to make her mind race when she was alone. But as the evening wore on and the apartment grew colder, the feeling intensified, wrapping around her like a tightening noose. She finally decided to go to bed early, hoping to shake off the feeling of dread that clung to her. But as she lay there in the quiet, trying to drift off to sleep, the sounds of the apartment began to stir. It was subtle at first, just the faintest rattle, like something shifting in the next room. She blinked, trying to dismiss it as the old building settling. But then the sound came again, more distinct this time, a door creaking open. At first she thought it was her roommate returning early, but then she noticed something strange. There were no lights turned on in the front room, no sounds of footsteps, no greeting. Instead, there was only a heavy silence, broken by the unsettling sound of something or someone moving around in the living room. It wasn't the sound of her roommate unpacking or coming in to grab something quickly. It was the sound of someone who didn't belong. Her stomach turned. Something was wrong. She froze. A cold rush of fear flooded her chest. The apartment had only one room between her and the intruder, and it was getting closer. She could hear the floorboards creaking as the figure moved toward the kitchen, a low shuffling sound as though they were dragging something heavy. Her first instinct was to run, but she knew the back door was locked. She didn't have the key. Panic clawed at her mind. She was trapped. The sense of terror was overwhelming. Her breath hitched as she tried to keep her thoughts from spiraling. She wasn't sure what she could do, but being a religious person, she began to pray. She closed her eyes tightly and whispered the words, hoping for divine intervention. The more she prayed, the clearer her mind became. Fear still buzzed at the edges of her thoughts, but the calmness that followed was like a protective shield. She realized that her best chance for survival was to stay as still and quiet as possible, pretending to be asleep, hoping the intruder wouldn't notice her. As she lay there pretending to sleep, the figure inched closer. She could hear his breathing now, heavy and uneven. Her heart raced in her chest, every beat echoing in her ears as the shadow of the man stretched longer and longer across the room. his presence a looming threat in the stillness. Her hands were clammy with sweat, and her entire body trembled, but she kept her eyes tightly shut. She didn't dare move a muscle. Then the unthinkable happened. The man stopped at the foot of her bed, standing there, looming over her. His shadow hung like a dark cloud, stretching far across the floor. She could hear him moving his head slowly from side to side, like he was trying to make out her face in the darkness. The quiet was suffocating. Her mind raced as she thought, if he gets any closer, he'll see that I'm awake. She tried to stifle her breath, but it was hard to keep quiet with her heart pounding in her chest. Time seemed to stretch and twist in that moment. And then, when she thought she could take no more, she let out a scream that pierced the silence, one that she hoped would send the intruder running. But instead of retreating, the figure stayed for a moment longer, then slowly turned around, walking back out of the room and disappearing into the darkness. The front door creaked again, and then it was silent. The apartment felt suffocating. My mother, still shaking with fear, scrambled to lock the door and flip on every light in the place. She didn't know what had just happened. Was it a nightmare? A hallucination? Her heart was still hammering as she tried to process the events, but she knew in her gut that it wasn't just a bad dream. It had been real. She immediately called the police, recounting every detail. When they arrived, they found that only a few dollars had been taken from her purse. But the terror she felt was real, too. The police officer took a statement and then showed my mom a series of mugshots, asking her to identify the intruder. The thing was, she hadn't seen his face clearly, just the silhouette of his towering frame, the long shadow cast across the room. After some deliberation, my mom pointed to a picture. "This one," she said, unsure but feeling something in her gut. The detective seemed disappointed. "I wish you'd chosen this one instead," he said, pointing to another man's face. "He's 6 feet 6 inches, just released from prison last week, and he lives just a few blocks from here." A chill ran down my mother's spine. She hadn't been shown a lineup, just these small, grainy pictures, so how could she have possibly known? She wondered if there was more to this than she had initially thought. But that wasn't the strangest part. The following week, my mother read a news article about another break-in just a few blocks away, eerily similar to what had happened to her. It wasn't just a coincidence anymore. It was as though someone or something had been watching her, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Feeling unsafe, my mom packed up and moved in with another friend for the next few weeks. Even after her roommate returned, my mom couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The apartment no longer felt like a home. It felt like a trap. Her mind kept replaying the eerie image of the man standing over her, his shadow stretching across the room, his slow movements as he watched her. It was as if the entire apartment was haunted by his presence, even after he had left. The fear lingered long after, every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind rattling the windows. She couldn't escape the feeling that she was still being watched. Even the walls seemed to whisper in the silence, as if the apartment itself had become a vessel for something sinister. The unease didn't leave her. It followed her everywhere. As time passed, my mother tried to forget about the incident, but the memories remained. A shadow in the corner of her vision, the faintest sound in the dead of night. She never felt completely safe again. The feeling of being watched never truly left her. And though the police never found the man, she often wondered whether the man who had entered her apartment was even real at all. Perhaps he was simply a manifestation of something darker, something beyond explanation, something that could follow her no matter where she went. And to this day, my mother can still feel the chill in the air when she remembers that night. Do you dare to listen to the dark? If tonight's tale gave you chills, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what creeps you out and what other stories you'd love us to explore. Don't miss out on the next terrifying story. Subscribe to DTC, The Place of the Brave, and join the family that thrives on the unknown. Tap the notification bell so you're the first to hear every spine-chilling tale. Share this video with someone brave enough to face the darkness, and let's dive deeper into the creeps that haunt our world. Comment below and become part of the terror. The darkness is calling, and we want you with us. Story 2, The Haunted Apartment, a true chilling horror story. When my sister first moved to Los Angeles to attend UCLA, she decided to rent an apartment across the street from the LA National Cemetery. It seemed like a great place at the time, quiet, away from the hustle of the city, and close enough to campus. On moving day, my dad and I helped her carry her boxes and set up her things, but after we left, my dad said something that chilled me to the bone. He told me that he had seen something in the apartment that made him feel uneasy, and he was concerned about her living there. Now, let me give you some context. My dad is a doctor, but he's also deeply religious. Over the years, he's had premonitions that came true exactly as he predicted, and it scared a lot of people around him. He's also claimed to see things most people would call paranormal, spirits, demons, and things that can't be explained. He says these encounters feel incredibly real to him, even though I've never inherited the same ability to sense or see such things. Growing up, I never felt like I could connect to that side of him, but that day, something in the apartment made my dad uncomfortable, and it stuck with me. As soon as we entered my sister's new apartment, my dad froze. He looked around as if something was off. Then he told me that while we were setting up, he saw a dark, shadowy figure dart across the living room, moving so fast it was like a blur, and slip through the back window. At first he thought it might have been an animal, but when he checked, the window was completely closed and locked. What really disturbed him was the fact that the window faced directly towards the cemetery. Something about that detail seemed to unsettle him deeply. After that, things only got worse. Over the next 2 years, my sister and her roommates experienced a series of strange, terrifying events that couldn't be explained. At first it was subtle. My sister would often hear her name being called from the living room, even when no one else was home. There were nights when she'd wake up and feel an icy cold breeze sweep past her, even though all the windows were shut. It was like the apartment had a cold, unseen presence, one that never seemed to leave. Her roommates weren't safe either. One night, my sister's roommate came running into the room, pale and shaken. She said she heard footsteps outside her door, but when she opened it, no one was there. They'd often hear noises in the hallway, like muffled voices or the soft click of footsteps when no one was supposed to be there. But the scariest part, every night they'd wake up to someone or something tapping or gently shaking their legs. At first they thought it was just sleep paralysis, but it was happening too often to be ignored. Sometimes objects around the apartment would move of their own accord, pans sliding across the kitchen counter, books falling off shelves with no one there to touch them. It was as if the very apartment itself was alive and not in a good way. One particularly chilling night I visited and my sister's roommate asked us all to come up to her loft to watch her arm. We were confused at first, but when she stood still in a specific spot, we saw it. Her arm hair standing up as though something unseen was right next to her. It wasn't just the sensation, we could all see it clearly, the hair on her arm bristling as if charged by an invisible force. Every time she stepped away from that spot, the hairs would fall back down. She did this several times, and each time the same thing happened. Her arm would react to something none of us could see. The most terrifying thing, though, wasn't just the strange occurrences in my sister's apartment, it was what the neighbors were experiencing too. Her next-door neighbor, a young woman who seemed to have a strange sensitivity to the supernatural, would sometimes step aside when she was visiting, as if letting someone invisible pass by. It wasn't just a random habit. She would do it with an air of familiarity, as though she knew exactly what was there. This unnerved my sister to the point where she stopped inviting the neighbor over entirely. But the neighbor's boyfriend, a strong athletic guy, had his own terrifying encounter. One day, when he came to visit, he was suddenly shoved backward, forcefully falling to the ground as if something or someone had tackled him from behind. There was no one else in the apartment at the time. The sheer force of it left him shaken, and he refused to go back. As for my sister, she was alone one night and heard her name being called from upstairs, from the loft. She was so terrified that she called me at midnight, asking me to come stay with her. She was too scared to even leave her bed. At the time, I was in San Diego, about a 2-hour drive away. I had been at a party, and despite the late hour, I decided to make the drive. It was clear that whatever was happening there was real. But when I arrived, nothing strange happened to me. I spent the weekend at her place, and although I didn't experience anything paranormal, my sister still felt the lingering unease. She said that no matter where she went in the apartment, it always felt like someone was watching her, waiting. As I reflect on everything now, I can't shake the feeling that there was something truly sinister about that apartment. My dad was right to be concerned. There was something in that place, something that had been there long before my sister moved in. The cemetery across the street, the strange events, and the eerie sensations all pointed to one thing. That apartment was haunted. Maybe it was the spirits of the dead, trapped between the worlds of the living and the afterlife. Maybe it was something darker, something older. Either way, it wasn't a place that anyone should feel comfortable in. Every time I think back on those days, I can still feel the cold dread that my sister experienced, the unnerving sense that something wasn't quite right. No one could explain what happened there, but one thing was certain. The apartment wasn't just haunted, it was alive in a way we couldn't understand. It made me realize that some places hold on to their dark pasts, their restless spirits, and their ancient fears. And if you're ever in a situation where you start to feel like you're not alone, trust your instincts. Sometimes it's not your imagination, it's something much darker. What if you were the one living there? What if the strange sounds, the whispers in the dark, and the feeling of being watched were more than just a trick of the mind? And what if, just like my sister, you were forced to confront the terrifying reality that some things never leave, even when the lights are on? Would you have the courage to stay? Or would you pack your things and leave before it's too late? Do you dare to listen to the dark? If tonight's tale gave you chills, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what creeps you out and what other stories you'd love us to explore. Don't miss out on the next terrifying story. Subscribe to DTC, The Place of the Brave, and join the family that thrives on the unknown. Tap the notification bell so you're the first to hear every spine-chilling tale. Share this video with someone brave enough to face the darkness, and let's dive deeper into the creeps that haunt our world. Comment below and become part of the terror. The darkness is calling, and we want you with us. Story 3. The Whispering Shadows, a chilling apartment horror story. It was a crisp November night when I moved into my new apartment, a small one-bedroom unit in a 6-unit building tucked away in a corner of the city. At 25 years old, I was trying to carve out a life for myself in a neighborhood that had its charm, a quirky, hipster vibe with a hint of mystery. The streets were lined with independent cafes, vintage art galleries, and eclectic shops that seemed to tell stories of their own. There was a constant hum of creative energy, the kind of place where you felt like everyone had a story, but few shared it openly. But there was also something else. Beneath the lively atmosphere, there was a strange undercurrent to the neighborhood, a whisper of crime, a sense of unease that most people chose to ignore. Though I enjoyed the bustling bars, the quaint dog parks where I could let my dog run free, there was always a nagging feeling that something just wasn't right. I had moved here alone. My dog Daisy was my only company. We settled into the small apartment, which was located on the ground floor of a building with a secured front entrance. However, the back gate was a different story. It didn't lock properly, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was an open invitation for anyone or anything to slip in unnoticed. Still, I brushed the thought away, convincing myself that I was just being paranoid. But things started to change when Daisy fell ill. At first, it was subtle, an occasional vomiting episode after she ate, nothing too alarming, but soon it escalated. She started having seizures every time she ate. Her body would jerk violently, and I would watch in helpless horror as she trembled uncontrollably. After the third or fourth episode, I rushed her to the vet. But every test came back clear. There were no answers. They told me it might just be some kind of food intolerance, something benign, something that could be easily treated. But I knew it wasn't that simple. As the days went on, Daisy's condition worsened. She would throw up every couple of hours during the night, and I had to clean up after her, barely getting any sleep myself. My days blurred into one another as I carried her from vet to vet, hoping someone would have an answer, but no one did. After 2 months of sleepless nights and constant worry, I took her to a better clinic, an emergency vet that specialized in difficult cases. They admitted her overnight, hoping to find a solution to whatever was causing her suffering. The next few hours felt like days. I stayed by her side, carrying her in my arms as I ran through the streets, crying, feeling helpless. The stress was overwhelming, but I told myself it was temporary. We would get through it together. I had to believe that. By the time I returned home around 7 p.m., the house felt empty, even though I wasn't alone. I turned on all the lights, desperately trying to banish the darkness that crept into every corner of the apartment. The phone rang constantly as the vet called with updates about Daisy. Every time, they reassured me that she was doing okay, that they were monitoring her, but my heart couldn't find peace. I tried to sleep that night, but the apartment felt different. The silence was heavy, oppressive. It felt like something was lurking just beyond my sight, something waiting. My phone buzzed again, a call from the vet. I answered, my voice barely a whisper. "How is she?" I asked, my throat tight. "She's stable," they said, "but we'll need to keep her under observation for the next few hours." I hung up, staring at the phone in my hands. The apartment felt too still, too quiet. The hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the faint creak of the old wooden floorboards beneath my feet, all of it seemed magnified, as if the building itself was holding its breath. It wasn't until 1:15 a.m. that things took a turn. The phone call had just ended. I had tried to lay down on the couch, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I thought I heard a faint noise, something distant, like a creak from the back door. My heart skipped a beat, and I froze, listening. It came again, a low, deliberate creak, as if someone was stepping lightly across the floor, but no one was supposed to be there. I got up slowly, my breath shallow, and approached the window, peeking through the blinds at the dark alley behind the building. I saw nothing, just the shadows of trees swaying in the wind, the empty, quiet street. I shook my head, trying to calm myself. It was nothing, just the wind. But then I heard it again, a soft tap, like someone's knuckles brushing against the wall. My pulse quickened. I looked over my shoulder toward the hallway that led to the back door. The air in the apartment felt different, thick with an energy that I couldn't explain. The tapping came again, louder this time, more urgent. And then a growl. It was faint at first, like the sound of something low and deep in the chest of a predator. My blood ran cold. I glanced nervously at the front door, even though I knew it was locked. I felt a strange compulsion to check again, to make sure it was secure, though I had locked it hours ago. The growling grew louder, closer now, as if someone was moving just outside the door. Then came a scratching sound, like nails dragging against the floor. Slowly, deliberately. My hands trembled as I moved toward the hallway, but I couldn't bring myself to go any further. The scratching stopped suddenly, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. And then I heard a whisper. Soft at first, barely audible, but unmistakable. "I'm here." I spun around, but there was no one there. The hallway was empty. The door was still locked. Yet the presence was undeniable. I could feel it, something watching me from the dark corners of the room. I backed away from the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. My thoughts raced. I grabbed my phone and called the vet, hoping that hearing a familiar voice would ground me. But when the phone picked up, it was a woman I hadn't heard before. "Is everything all right?" she asked, her voice calm, but there was something strange in it, something that set my nerves on edge. "Your dog, is she okay?" I almost couldn't answer. "She's fine," I said, my voice cracking, but I knew she wasn't fine. She wasn't here. I wasn't sure if I was talking about my dog anymore or the strange feeling that had settled over the apartment. The scratching continued, faint, but it was there. I felt the cold weight of fear settle into my bones. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, but then I heard it again, the whisper. This time it was clearer, and it came from the back of the apartment. "I'm here." I didn't wait to hear more. I ran to the door, slammed it shut, locked it again, and sat on the floor, unable to move, unable to breathe. The darkness seemed to press in on me from all sides. The presence, the whispering, the growling, it was all too much. I wanted to scream, to run, but something held me there, rooted to the spot. By dawn, the sounds had stopped. The apartment was silent, save for the distant hum of the city waking up. I tried to convince myself that it had all been a nightmare, that I had imagined the whole thing. But deep down, I knew the truth. I wasn't alone. Someone was waiting for me in the dark. And it was far from over. As the darkness deepens and the stories grow more unsettling, we venture deeper into the unknown together. Each chilling tale brings us closer to the eerie truths lurking just beyond the veil of reality. The terror doesn't stop here, it only gets worse. Subscribe to DTC, the Place of the Brave, now and stay on the edge of your seat. You won't want to miss what's lurking in the shadows next. Hit that notification bell and prepare for the next terrifying chapter. Remember, in the world of DTC, the Place of the Brave are always waiting, and they never rest. Good luck sleeping tonight.